Well, it does seem that some of the issues we've been banging on about on this program for probably a decade now concerning the property market, particularly in Australia's capital cities, are starting to resonate. And I suppose when you have property prices in most of the big cities increasing by 20 to 25% in the middle of a pandemic and arguably a recession, then the alarm bells most probably should be ringing. But from the IMF down to some government agencies here, there are now people saying we've got to rein this crazy situation in. Now, on the other hand, you get text messages like I got yesterday morning from people saying, I'm really happy the property prices are going through the roof. My real estate investments are doing quite nicely. Thank you very much. Well, that's good for those that do have those, but what about for those who do not? Well, this is a question that Jason Falinski, who's the chair of the Standing Committee on Tax and Revenue in Canberra, is currently trying to examine. And he wrote in the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday, the way things stand, there is little chance that my daughter or her friends will be able to afford their own home. I suppose the question is, why does that matter? Well, as Jason Falinski points out, among other things, low home ownership correlates with increased wealth inequality, greater democratic instability, and less economic productivity. I would have thought all those things would be bad for a modern democracy. He joins us on the program. Jason, good morning to you.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
I'm okay. Now, I suppose the only thing harder than trying to solve peace in the Middle East is trying to work out how on earth you sort out the Australian property market, but it is running away. Well, it's more than running, it's galloping away at the moment, and we are meant to be, aren't we, in the middle of some pretty tough economic times. We don't have hundreds of thousands of migrants coming in, which is a contributing factor in the past to property prices going through the roof. What is going on?
Well, I mean, that's what we've got an inquiry to have a look at. But when you look at these things, and you look at the reasons that, all the academics, all the city planners, all the high priests of policy, who are the people who constantly tell us, if we just listen to them, we'll fix all the problem, while it's just got worse and worse and worse over the 5 decades. And one by one, each of their excuses has fallen by the side. And I think until we actually start accepting that these excuses have to end, we won't actually start on the path to actually solving this problem. And as you pointed out, Michael, the implications of that are massive. Everything from how equal your society is, how fair it is, how much freedom individuals have, and how stable your democracy is on the line.
One of the points you made in your article, and this is true, is that low home ownership correlates with increased wealth inequality and greater democratic instability, but also you said less economic productivity. Isn't it the case, though, that the way we have it at the moment, people are borrowing stonking great amounts of money, we are really reducing the national economic productivity, because money that otherwise would be spent in shops or could be discretionary income is instead paying off a mortgage.
Absolutely. You've also got people investing in property instead of investing in the next Microsoft, in the next Google, in the next Facebook, in the next, dog grooming salon.
And banks lending instead of to business to property again.
And that's right. And so we don't actually have banks. We basically have land banks in Australia that lend against very lazy capital rather than entrepreneurial capital, which is where you create new jobs, new ideas, new goods and services that all of us love to use and have enormous benefit for our community. So what we're doing at the moment on that front is just not a really positive outcome for our society and for the future of us as a nation.
The problem is, though, you try, and I've tried, you try telling that to the Australian public, though, that own their home. They might have a mortgage on it, but they own it. And every, so many nights they put on the 6 o'clock news and they see that there's been a sale in their suburb, 800,000 above the reserve, and they think, oh, well, gee, I know Frank's house, that's a bit of a dump. Imagine what ours is worth, love. And, you try telling all of this to those people who are invested in the market, and they'll say, we don't want anything to change, Jason.
Well, I think that's changing though, Michael. And the reason I say that I think it's changing is when you look at house sales number of houses sold from 2015 through to this year, they're lower than they were in 1992. So essentially what is starting to happen is people are becoming trapped in their own homes. So people won't sell the house that they live in because they're afraid that the minute they sell it, they will become homeless because they won't be able to find another house to buy. And if they can, it'll be 2 or 3 years down the track, and they won't be able to afford that because house prices are going up by 20% per annum. So everyone is just sitting tight. Now, that's not investment. That's not wealth creation. That's imprisonment. People feeling like they can't actually move from one place to the next because they feel like if they let go of what they have, they'll never be able to get back into the market. That's a really bad system that we've created. I mean, and I'm sure you will have a lot of real estate agents ring you after this conversation who will say to you, the problem is not the price of housing. The problem is there's no housing to buy. And so I've had multiple real estate agents tell me, in Sydney at least, that they put an apartment or a terrace on the market. One example I can give you is a terrace in my area. The real estate agent told me he put it on the market, went up on Domain. He got a phone call within the half hour. The asking price was $3.3 million. The person offered $4.2 to sell it to him then and there. Oh. The vendor said, we'll do it for $4.4. They went back to the seller, to the buyer. The buyer said, yes, I'll pay $4.4. That was 1.1 above the asking price, sight unseen. And when they finally came to do the contract and let the people in, he said, why were you happy to buy this sight unseen? He said, I have been looking for nearly 24 months, nearly 2 years. I can't find a house to buy. So in the end, I just took any house that was on the market. That is what we have created in New South Wales. That is what local councils, that is what the state government has created. They've created a market of desperate buyers, and desperation is not something you want to see in any market.
No, and that's creeping into Victoria, Queensland and elsewhere, even the ACT, of course.
Can I,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
no,
but
please,
can I make this point?
Yeah.
Like everyone says, oh, that's just a Sydney problem. Let me tell you this. In the top or the lowest 25 cities for housing affordability in the world, so globally, Australia has 5 out of the top 20, the bottom 25 cities. So Sydney's the third least affordable housing market in the world, behind Singapore and Hong Kong. Then you've got Melbourne, then you've got Brisbane, then you've got Adelaide, then you've got Perth. And Perth's housing market dropped by 35% when the mining boom came to an end. And it's still number 23 globally in terms of the least affordable housing in the world. This is an Australian problem.
It's insane.
It's not a global problem. Like everyone keeps saying, oh, this is happening all around the world at the moment because interest rates are so low. No. We have created this here in Australia. We have the least densely populated continent in the world outside the South Pole, with some of the highest average weekly earnings in the world, if not the highest average weekly earnings in the world. Plenty of land to build on, plenty of money to buy those houses. We should have the most affordable housing in the world, not the least affordable housing in the world.
Now, you and I agree on that, but then everyone listening would say, well, then why the hell haven't we achieved it? And it's a complicated scenario, but, I mean, one of the things that I know in the past you've pointed to is, okay, yes, there's property speculation, there's some quirks in the tax system, net migration plays a role, they all need to be looked at, but you keep saying supply, supply, supply. But I think that issue you highlighted earlier in your neck of the woods, it sort of bells the cat, and that is, that person could have bought ample apartments anywhere, but didn't want them. He obviously or she wanted a house with a bit of a backyard, probably for the kids to run around, and the sort of the great Australian dream. But that type of dwelling is increasingly hard to find. There's apartments as far as the eye can see. We're building apartments like it's going out of fashion. But the detached dwelling within cooey of a capital city, that's like hen's teeth at the moment, and achieving supply change there is hard.
Oh, look, the Reserve Bank in 2019 commissioned a study into why do we have the least affordable housing anywhere in the world. And it's a great paper. It's up on their website. It's by an economist called Peter Tulip. And what it found is, just on apartments, it found that apartments in Sydney, 70% or 68% of the cost of an apartment in Sydney is due to zoning laws. So the person who is creating more housing unaffordability and pushing more people out of the housing market in Australia than any other person in Australia is Clover Moore. And, people need to act, the Sydney Morning Herald needs to report that. Because the reason Clover Moore can do this is because no one knows it, no one holds it to account. But there's an econometric piece of research that shows that if you wanted to reduce the cost of an apartment in the city, in Sydney, tomorrow, you could do it by reforming zoning laws. She refuses to do it. She refuses to talk about it.
It's not just Sydney, though. I mean, in Melbourne, $1 million apartment, $220,000 is tax.
220,000. So to be clear, when you buy a $780,000 apartment in Melbourne, you pay $1 million due to tax and charges. State governments have used property, councils have used property as just an easy way for them to raise money to spend on themselves, and that's not right, because the people who are actually hurting, and this is the key to it, is if you are under 40 in Australia at the moment, you are less likely to own a home than at any other time since 1947. And when that data is updated at the end of this year, it's likely to have been at any time since this nation was founded. And the founding principle of the Australian dream of this nation was that everyone could own a piece of land, because we wanted to create a classless society. And back in the 19th century, the difference between the aristocracy and the working class was only the aristocracy owned land. So one of the founding principles of Australia was that everyone would be able to own a piece of land. So we had a classless society. And petty bureaucrats, high priests of policy, planning academics, all the people who've created this problem are actually undermining the very core belief and structure on which this nation was formed.
Great to talk to you, Jason. We could talk forever. As I said, it's probably the second hardest thing behind solving Middle East peace, or maybe it's harder. I'm not sure. But this is something a lot of people are talking about, and we'll keep talking over the months ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Jason Falinski there. Member for Mackellar, of course, but also chair of the Standing Committee on Tax and Revenue. They're looking at this issue of home ownership as we speak.